Do you ever get that random feeling of nostalgia, specifically with consoles you grew up playing as a kid? People in my age range will tell you about the Xbox 360, PS3, the DS, and so on, but rarely few will talk about growing up with the SEGA Genesis. I am no different when I say I also grew up with the consoles I said about a second ago, but there's a different charm when it comes to the SEGA Genesis. I remember being about 10 or 11 years old when I begged my mom to buy me a SEGA Genesis Model 2 from eBay, and knowing the stubborn asshole child I was, my mom gave in. After a couple weeks of waiting for the mail to arrive, it had finally arrived. The seller included a copy of Sonic the Hedgehog 2 bundled with the console, and I plugged it into my big boxy TV, and the rest was history. After a while, you'd imagine that a 11-year-old with the attention span of a goldfish would grow tired of the same game. And by a while, I mean an hour of playing Sonic 2 and getting stuck on Oil Ocean Zone. I wanted more. Collecting SEGA Genesis cartridges became like a drug to me. Imagine the side effects of crack, but enhance that by like 300%, and the substance being a 16-bit cartridge. I went on eBay mindlessly with my mom's credit card, saved and searched the following: Sonic SEGA Genesis game. After what feels like scrolling and looking through dozens of pages of your usual Sonic 1, Sonic 2, and even sometimes Sonic Spinball, I saw something that caught my eye. What the fuck is a Sonic Jam 6? What the fuck is a Russian Federation? I saw what could only be described as the coolest cover of all time. You had a 3D render of Sonic from Sonic Riders just posed up in a checkerboard background with a big and bright text: Sonic Jam 6. Now look, I knew about the Sonic Jam compilation disc on the Sega Saturn, but why did no one tell me they made fucking 5 more sequels? It was all sunshines and rainbows until I saw screenshots of the game. It was a red Sonic and Super Mario on the Sega Genesis. I have never committed credit card fraud on my mom's card so fast in my life. Who cares that the shipping from Russia was more expensive than the game itself? It wasn't my money at the end of the day. To make a long story short, when Sonic Jam 6 arrived, I had become so obsessed with what I now know is a SEGA Genesis bootleg. I wanted to share my backstory lore on these because, as much as they aren't relatively available here in the States, I know people only grew up with these games because that's all they could find or buy. Bootleg cartridges are mostly found in places like Russia, as mentioned previously, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and China from what I could remember. So I'd love to hear your stories. I'd also like to mention in this video the difference between a bootleg and a pirate copy. I use this same terminology with vinyl records, so just hear me out. A bootleg is a game that's either constructed from the ground up or just a ROM hack using copyrighted material or characters without a license granted from the original copyright holders. A pirate copy is just an already released game cheaply slapped into a cartridge with new cover art or labels to at least differentiate from the official ones. I'll delve into both of these topics, but only briefly with the pirate copies because, well, there isn't much history. With that out of the way, here's my best attempt at going over the history of SEGA Genesis bootlegs. Now, it's physically impossible to pinpoint an exact time and place someone decided to make bootleg cartridges for the SEGA Genesis. For all we know, it could have just been some tweaker with a Windows 98 machine and a whole lot of empty cartridges in their basement. And if so, thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Tweaker, for creating a whole other wacky world for 16-bit retro gaming. What I can somewhat pinpoint is 3 of the biggest and notorious distributors for SEGA Genesis bootlegs, almost like the drug lords or the mafia of the Genesis cartridges. But first up is Taiwan's Gametech. Gametech was founded around the late 80s and early 90s by CEO Zhongzi Yang. I'm fucking sorry if I completely fumbled that, but like their name suggests, they were a company located in a city called Taichung City in Taiwan. Gametech specialized in creating and developing original games using licensed IPs. Because regions like Asia and Latin America, regulations of copyright laws were almost non-existent. Gametech used region bypass chips so their games could run on every single Genesis model or region. They are notorious for games such as Sonic Jam 6, Squirrel King, Lion King 2, Pocket Master, and Super Donkey Kong 99. Using the same engine and mapping, they later reskinned their game Squirrel King to create Super Mario World for the Genesis. As previously mentioned, Sonic Jam 6 is just a Super Mario clone featuring a red Sonic and clumsy controls. If for some reason you haven't checked this game out, I highly recommend you do because you'll understand my love-hate relationship with this game. Many of the bootleg games they released were later ported to the SNES. Gametech's activities in the gray market business appears to have ended around late 2002. Their last known activity to date was the direct involvement on a gambling website known as Bingo King. Around 2020 to 2021, the Bingo King website and domain seems to have been taken down and would be non-functional for the foreseeable future. I personally believe it was a good thing it was taken down because if you trust gambling your money to former pirates, I'm sorry, but you just deserve to get your money taken. Another huge company in the bootlegging scene was BMB. BMB has a history of making clones, ports, and hacks for the SEGA Genesis. They were founded in the mid-2010s, which was way past the Genesis life cycle. I mean, at this point you had consoles like the 360, PS3, and the Wii, but honestly, I can't even hate on them too much because I'm talking about it in 2025. They came out with bangers such as Felix the Cat, Mario 3, Mario 4, fucking Ben 10, Angry Birds in Russia. Oh, and Shrek. Yes, you heard that right. Shrek was a ROM hack of Yogi Bear that reskinned the character to feature Shrek in all of his green glory. Although the release date of most of these releases are relatively unknown, they are rumored to have been released around 2011 to 2014. You can find a lot, if not all of these releases on websites such as the Internet Archive or searching through shady foreign websites for the cartridge. Other than their origin of country and possible foundation, BMB has little to none information about their group and their whereabouts to this day, but I hope whoever decided to swap Yogi Bear and Shrek is living lavishly on a nice cruise ship. For our last huge company, we're ending it off with a bang, featuring the creators of Assassin's Creed, Naruto, Kung Fu Panda, and fucking Hugo. I am proud to announce TOF, or TOF. TOF is another distributor based in Russia with nearly all of their games releasing in the mid to late 2010s. And no, I am not kidding about their game discography. They have a huge list of huge game IPs released on the Genesis. Yeah, most of them are shitty reskins just to slap the title and name on a cartridge, but so are all the other companies I listed as well. I don't know, but if you ask anyone what their favorite Genesis game is and they whip out fucking Assassin's Creed for the Genesis, dude, they can have the keys to my house, passwords to my bank account, and at least 5 solids. Just like BMO, the bigger the company, the less information on them. I mean, barely information exists on TOF, and I mean barely any. I'm over here scrambling through Google looking for information. I'm literally using scraps right now. But from what I can tell and see, all of the games are translated to Russian. That's about all I have. Now let's briefly talk about pirate copies. As previously mentioned, pirate copies are games that have already been released officially that are either illegally modified to translate game text for the country it's being made in, or it's just the game lazily slapped onto a cartridge with new box art. Pirate copies are usually made in regions such as Asia and South America. Countries like Russia didn't really have a huge market for Genesis games, so they definitely had a purpose aside from just copying and making a quick buck. The earliest reference of a pirate copy is the Simon Y prototype of Sonic the Hedgehog 2. The Simon Y prototype of Sonic 2 is a widely distributed prototype build of Sonic 2, which features incomplete and unreleased zones such as the infamous Hidden Palace Zone and Wood. This specific prototype had an interesting story behind it. According to the co-creator of Sonic the Hedgehog, Yuji Naka, the prototype was stolen at a New York toy fair in 1992. After it was stolen, it was rumored that the person behind the plan used a Super Magic Drive, which was a popular game copier that had just came into the market. Several months before the official Sonic the Hedgehog 2 game released into markets, the prototype was being sold all over Asia and Brazil markets. It wasn't until 6 years later when Simon Y found the ROM dumped on a Chinese website and decided to make a website documenting the prototype's existence. The prototype was compiled around early 1992 of August. Now, it doesn't really get much interesting than that. We don't really have much information on pirate copies, but here's a beautiful gallery of examples that I will showcase for your enjoyment. Now, that was a majority of the history of weird and obscure SEGA Genesis bootlegs. I hope you learned something new today, because I sure as hell learned a lot just from doing research. All of the sources used in this video are linked below in the description. Massive shoutouts to the Bootleg Games Wiki, SEGA Retro, and Sonic Retro, and of course, Google. I'll catch you guys on the next one.